Let me start with the truth. How we communicate shapes everything. It shapes your relationships, your self-worth, and the way you navigate the world. But here's the thing. Most of us, we weren't taught how to do it well. Think back. Did anyone ever say, here's how you express your feelings without shutting the other person down, or here's how to handle conflict without it spiraling out of control? Probably not. Instead, we learn by watching. Maybe you grew up in a house where yelling was the norm, where the loudest voice won every argument, or maybe it was the opposite. No one talked about hard things, and silence became the rule. Over time, these patterns become second nature. And here's the thing about patterns. If they're not working for you, they'll keep working against you until you change them. But to change them, we have to understand them first. Let's break down the 4 main communication styles: aggressive, passive, passive-aggressive, and assertive. Let's start with aggressive communication. This one's the easiest to spot because it's loud, it's forceful, it's the steamroller of communication styles, pushing through everything to get what it wants. Picture this. A partner walks into the room, sees a mess in the kitchen and snaps, "Why is it always like this? Can't you do anything right? Do I have to do everything myself?" Maybe they're raising their voice, maybe they're pointing a finger or slamming their hand on the counter. Aggressive communication is about control. It's about dominating the conversation, overpowering the other person and making sure your point is the only one that matters. And sure, aggression might feel powerful in the moment, but let me ask you this. When someone yells at you, does it make you feel closer to them? Of course not. Aggression doesn't build connection. It creates fear. It escalates tension. And while it might get results in the short term, sure, the dishes might get washed, it damages trust in the long run. Relationships can't survive on fear. Now let's flip the script and talk about passive communication, the other end of the spectrum. If aggression is the steamroller, passivity is the doormat. Instead of yelling about the mess, imagine a partner who sees the dishes, sighs quietly, and starts cleaning. They don't say a word, but inside, they're boiling. Why am I always the one cleaning up? Why can't they pitch in? They think. But the words never come out. Passivity feels safer in the moment. It avoids conflict, keeps the peace. But it comes at a cost. When you stay silent, you teach yourself, and the other person, that your needs don't matter. Over time, that silence turns into resentment. And resentment, it doesn't just hurt the relationship, it eats away at you. It makes you feel invisible, unimportant, like your voice doesn't count. And that's a hard place to live. Then there's passive-aggressive communication, the sneaky one. Passive aggression avoids direct conflict, but lets frustration leak out in little jabs. Back to the messy kitchen. Instead of yelling or staying quiet, maybe you start banging pots and slamming cupboards, or you mutter under your breath, "I guess I'm the only one who cares about this house." Maybe you give your partner the silent treatment, crossing your arms and waiting for them to figure out why you're upset. Here's the problem with passive-aggressive communication. It doesn't actually communicate anything. It creates confusion, frustration, and even more distance. The other person is left guessing, and the real issue? It stays buried. If this sounds familiar, ask yourself, what am I trying to say? And why don't I feel safe saying it directly? Now, if any of these patterns sound familiar, you're not alone. These habits come from somewhere. Maybe yelling was how you got heard growing up. Maybe staying quiet kept you safe in an unsafe situation. Maybe sarcasm felt like the only way to express yourself without starting a fight. These patterns served a purpose once, but if they're not working for you now, it's time to let them go. That brings us to assertive communication. This is where everything changes. Assertive communication is about standing up for yourself without stepping on anyone else. It's saying, here's how I feel, here's what I need, in a way that leaves room for the other person to respond. It's not about winning or avoiding conflict. It's about creating understanding. Let's go back to that messy kitchen. Instead of yelling, staying quiet, or making a sarcastic jab, assertiveness sounds like this. I feel frustrated when the kitchen is messy because I need more help keeping things clean. Can we come up with a plan to divide the chores? Notice how that changes the dynamic? It's not blaming, it's not shaming. It's clear, calm, and focused on solving the problem together. Assertiveness works because it doesn't create fear, resentment, or confusion. It builds trust. And trust? That's the foundation of any healthy relationship. In situations of domestic violence where power and control are often at the center of the conflict, assertive communication disrupts the cycle. It says, I value myself enough to speak up, and I value this relationship enough to listen. But let's be real, this isn't easy. If you've spent years yelling to be heard, staying quiet to keep the peace, or hinting at your feelings instead of stating them outright, assertiveness can feel uncomfortable at first. That's okay. New habits always feel weird before they feel normal. The more you practice, the easier it gets. And this is where the tools come in. I statements and boundaries. I statements are like the Swiss Army knife of assertive communication. They're small, simple, and incredibly versatile. Instead of blaming the other person for what's wrong, they help you focus on how you feel and what you need. The formula is simple. I feel emotion when specific situation because I need specific need. For example, if your partner keeps interrupting you during arguments, instead of snapping, "Why can't you just let me finish? You're so rude." Assertiveness sounds like this. I feel frustrated when I'm interrupted because I need to feel heard. Can we take turns speaking so we both have a chance to share? And what if someone doesn't respect your feelings? That's where boundaries come in. Boundaries are your invisible fences. They protect your emotional and physical well-being. They're not about controlling the other person. They're about showing them how to interact with you in a way that feels safe and respectful. For example, if someone yells at you, a boundary might sound like this. I'm not okay with being yelled at. I need us to speak calmly or I'll have to step away until we can. Boundaries only work if you enforce them. That means following through if the yelling continues, not to punish the other person but to protect yourself. Boundaries and I statements work together to create healthy communication. One expresses your feelings and the other enforces respect. Together they lay the foundation for relationships built on trust, safety, and mutual understanding. First, let's talk about your default communication style. Think back to the last time you were in a conflict. Maybe with your partner, a family member, or even a coworker. How did you react? Did you raise your voice and try to take control? Did you go quiet and hope the problem would go away? Or maybe you threw out a sarcastic comment hoping they'd get the hint. Whatever it was, I want you to ask yourself, why is that your go-to response? What's underneath it? Maybe it's fear. Fear of being ignored or fear of making things worse. Or maybe it's just habit. Something you've been doing for so long you don't even think about it anymore. Recognizing your default style is the first step to changing it. Now here's the second challenge. I want you to practice using an I statement. Think about a recent situation that didn't go the way you wanted. Maybe you felt frustrated, hurt, or ignored. What could you have said differently? How could you have used an I statement to express how you felt and what you needed? Let's say, for example, that you felt overwhelmed because your partner didn't help with household responsibilities. Instead of saying, "You never help me," you might say, "I feel exhausted when I handle everything on my own because I need us to share the load." Can we come up with a plan to split things more evenly? Imagine how that might have changed the outcome. Practice reframing that situation and think about how you can apply it the next time something similar comes up. The third challenge is about boundaries. This one's big. I want you to identify one area of your life where your boundaries aren't being respected. Maybe it's a partner who raises their voice during arguments, maybe it's a family member who criticizes you constantly. Whatever it is, ask yourself, what's the boundary I need to set? What do I need to say to protect myself? And most importantly, how will I enforce it if it's crossed? Because here's the thing about boundaries, they only work if you stick to them. Saying, "I'm not okay with being yelled at" means nothing if you stay in the room while someone's yelling. Enforcing that boundary might mean walking away until the conversation can happen respectfully. Yes, it's uncomfortable, yes, it's hard, but it's also necessary. Setting and enforcing boundaries shows the people around you and yourself that your needs matter. Here's another challenge, and this one's about your emotions. I want you to think about a time when you felt out of control during a conflict. Maybe you got so angry that you yelled, or maybe you shut down completely because the situation felt overwhelming. What was the trigger? What set you off? And looking back, how do you think you could have handled it differently? Understanding your emotional triggers is powerful because it helps you pause the next time those feelings come up. Instead of reacting on autopilot, you can respond with intention. And finally, I want you to imagine what a healthy conversation could look like. Picture a future conflict with someone close to you, your partner, a friend, maybe even a parent. Imagine both of you communicating assertively. What would you say? How would they respond? How would it feel to resolve the issue with respect instead of tension? Visualization is a powerful tool. It helps you see what's possible and prepares you to act when the moment comes. Now you might be wondering why I'm asking you to do all of this. Why reflect on your patterns, your triggers, your boundaries? Because this is how we break the cycle of violence. It's not about changing the other person, it's about changing how you show up in the relationship. When you communicate clearly, set boundaries, and express your needs, you're teaching the people around you how to treat you. You're creating a foundation for trust, respect, and safety, and that's where healthy relationships begin. So I'm leaving you with these challenges not to overwhelm you, but to empower you. Start small. Start with one conversation, one boundary, one step toward the life you deserve, because you are worth it. Your relationships are worth it, and change is possible, one choice at a time. For more anger management tools, coping skills, short videos, short audio clips, and free audiobooks, visit Dr. Rick at www.breakingchaosbuildingclarity.com.